I'm going to invite Dr. Weaver to join us here in the front. And again, we'll have a short question and answer period. We do have those both microphones, and before you ask your question, I'll just remind you, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Athena Pappas from Tufts Dental School. I wanted to make a comment about the bisphosphonates. It's the IV bisphosphonates that we're really concerned about, not so much the Fosamax, et cetera. And I have so many patients coming in petrified and having stopped their medications. One thing we're recommending is drug holidays after five years, et cetera. But I will tell you that when we did our Condor study, I did follow up on people that I had treated for bisphosphonate necrosis, and the majority of them had passed away from breast cancer or another cancer. It's not something that people should shy away from because of bisphosphonate necrosis of the jaw. I've only had one woman who was on bisphosphonates for 20 years in her late 90s with Fosamax.
I agree. The American Society of Bone Mineral Research have the similar position statement that there are very rare side effects, and not to overreact, but everybody is. The patients, but also the dentists and the general practitioners are all afraid. So the drug holidays have come along with no evidence for how long or when or if they're effective. Just let's try that because everybody's afraid.
Wouldn't do it. Only after 5 years you consider drug holidays.
So this question, Penny Chris Etherton, questions for Roger. Can you talk about the role of calories in maintaining muscle mass, and especially relative to protein?
Yes. So clearly, if you're in a state of protein energy or energy deficit, you can have an accelerated loss in muscle. So if you're in hospital and you're not eating enough calories, that can accelerate the loss in muscle. But we did some studies when even if you just exclusively reduce the protein intake to like half the RDA and maintain energy balance, have them not lose weight. We did a small clinical study. You still lose muscle significantly. So, but I think the important point is that if you combine energy deficit with protein restriction, it's much more accelerated.
And it affects bone too. Yeah.
Here, are there any more questions? Oh, please step to the microphone. We'd love to hear it.
I'll just get up because it's being recorded. I wondered what the current status.
You know what?
It's being recorded in the webcast.
Yes.
I'm particularly concerned that dietitians and nutritionists really aren't paying enough attention to sarcopenia, and particularly if there are going to be drugs that are effective. And I don't know the status of the drugs. How are they coming in? Are they showing some positive effects? I wondered if you could explain the role of the drugs plus exercise plus diet, Roger.
Right. So most of the pharma trials in drugs targeting muscle are in either early or late phase 2. The main class of drugs that are in development now are the SARMs, the selective androgen receptor modulators. So those act on the androgen receptor like testosterone, but they are more specific for skeletal muscle. So they have fewer of the purported off-target effects of testosterone. So their safety profile is typically lower and has been lower in most early trials. The other class of compounds have been the compounds that have targeted either the inhibition or the trapping of the myostatin protein. Myostatin is a negative regulator of muscle growth, so if you block its action, you cause muscle hypertrophy. So those are still all in early development. The problem, and they're also being investigated in other diseases in which muscle loss is a secondary outcome, like COPD or chronic heart failure, with the idea being that there still isn't really there's unlikely to be an approved indication for sarcopenia because it's not really yet still an accepted condition or disease. That will come, I think. But those are the main classes. And yes, I think it's going to be important to understand how those medicines interact with nutrients, with energy, protein intake, other nutrients, and also how they interact with physical activity. And I'm sure there's going to be a scenario eventually where treatment decisions are going to be made that will probably start with lifestyle changes like activity and diet, and may progress to other therapies in more severe situations where a participant has such low muscle mass that they can't walk, for example, or they're that limited.
Vivica Craig from Virginia Tech. Just to follow up on Johanna's question, the last thing you said, Roger, was that in your presentation that there may be a role for anti-inflammatory micronutrients to either prevent or mitigate sarcopenia. So what kinds of nutrients and therapeutic doses are we really kind of talking about for future research?
Yeah, I don't know. There's been some small studies showing that omega-3 fatty acids can increase skeletal muscle protein synthesis in older adults and actually can increase lean mass accumulation. I don't recall the doses that they used, but that's just one example. We know that changing to the Mediterranean-like diet can lower inflammatory burden. We don't know if it lowers it enough to have effects on skeletal muscle, but there are clear observational studies, and if Luigi's still here, they've done most of them, showing that higher levels of inflammation cause more accelerated loss in walking speed, increased ADL disability, and increased mobility disability. So we haven't connected all those dots, but I think we should try to get there.
Thank you both for great presentations. Kathy Weimer from General Mills Bell Institute of Health and Nutrition. Connie, I was curious, and maybe you hit on this and I maybe missed it. Do we have any longitudinal type data that around kids during that adolescent period where they've not been getting enough calcium and D, and then seeing what happens later on, like around fractures and things? Because I think that would be a very helpful set of data, but I just am not as familiar with that literature.
So you mean observational or an early intervention and later catch up?
Either.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think there's better data in the animal literature where you can control the diet for a longer period of time. And there's some ability to catch up from an earlier deficit later in life, but it's not complete.
Okay, with that, I'd like to thank everybody, and please help me thank our speakers for a wonderful session. Okay, part 2 of this session actually begins at 3:10, so I'm going to ask everyone to return here for that. Thank you very much.